She slid the brochure across the table like she was doing me a favor. It landed next to my coffee cup, glossy, trifold, with a photograph of smiling white-haired people playing cards in a sunlit common room. Meadow Ridge Senior Living. Underneath that, in smaller letters, where every day feels like home. I picked it up. I read it. I set it back down. My daughter was watching me the way you watch someone open a gift you're not sure they'll like. Hopeful. A little nervous. But underneath that, something else. Something I'd seen before in people who've already made up their minds and are just waiting for you to catch up. We toured it last week, she said. The memory care wing is beautiful, and they have a garden, Mom. You love gardens. I do love gardens. I've been tending my own for 31 years. I took a sip of my coffee. Outside the window of the restaurant, 2 pigeons were fighting over a piece of bread on the sidewalk. I watched them for a moment before I looked back at my daughter. That's very thoughtful of you, sweetheart, I said. And I meant it. Not the way she wanted me to mean it. But I meant it. My name is Linda. Well, people who know me call me Lynn. I'm 67 years old. I retired 2 years ago from 28 years of managing accounts receivable for a mid-sized manufacturing company in Columbus, Ohio. I know how money moves. I know how paper trails work. I know what it looks like when someone is trying to reroute funds before the invoice comes due. I have one daughter. Her name is Audrey. She's 41, married to a man named Spencer, and they have 2 kids, a 9-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl, who I adore completely and separately from everything that happened with their parents. I have one son. His name is Owen. He's 38, works in logistics, lives 40 minutes away. We used to talk every Sunday. We don't anymore. I'll get to that. My husband, Gary, passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 14 weeks from diagnosis to gone. I tell you that not for sympathy. I've had 4 years to carry it, but because it matters to the story. When Gary died, we had been married 41 years. Everything we built together. The house, the savings. The brokerage account we started in 1998 with $8,000 and added to every year like clockwork. Gary handled most of the investment decisions, but I was always watching, always learning. I may not have done the clicking, but I understood every position we held. When he died, I became the sole owner of all of it. The housings paid off. The brokerage account, the IRA, the small parcel of land in rural Kentucky that Gary bought in 1994 from his uncle. For reasons I never fully understood, but that turned out to be worth something by the time we were old enough to care. I was not a woman who needed managing. I want you to remember that. The brochure at brunch was in April, but the groundwork started much earlier than that. Looking back now, I can trace it, the way you can only trace things after the fact when you're no longer inside them. It started with small comments. Things said lightly, then dropped, then said again 6 weeks later in a different way. Mom, have you thought about simplifying your finances? It must be exhausting to manage all that yourself. Spencer's firm handles a lot of estate planning. He could just take a look, no pressure. Owen and I were talking, and we both just worry. You've been so tired lately. I hadn't been tired. I'd been grieving, which is different, but I let it go. Then came the suggestion about the financial advisor. Spencer's had a contact, someone who worked with seniors transitioning their assets. I said I already had a financial advisor. Thank you, a woman I'd worked with for 11 years named Patricia Assi, who I trusted completely and who had my power of attorney documents already on file. Audrey said, "It's just a second opinion, Mom." I said I didn't need a second opinion on my own portfolio. She went quiet in that particular way she has, not angry quiet, studied quiet, like she was making a mental note. Then in February, 2 months before the brunch, Owen called me on a Tuesday evening. He doesn't usually call on Tuesdays. We talked about his kids, about a movie he'd seen, about a recipe I'd sent him. Then at the end, almost like an afterthought, he said, "Hey, have you thought about what happens if something goes wrong? Like, medically? Audrey's worried about you being alone. She thinks maybe it's worth having a professional assess, just to make sure everything's documented right." A professional assess what exactly? I asked. Your capacity, just as a baseline, so no one can question anything later. I was quiet for a moment, then I said, "Owen, Who suggested you say this to me? He paused too long. Just think about it, he said. Audrey loves you. I love you. We're just trying to help. I got off the phone and sat in my kitchen for a long time. I thought about the word capacity. I thought about what it would mean for someone to formally question mine. And then I called Patricia. Here's what I found out. In the state of Ohio, if an adult child or any interested party believes a parent is incapable of managing their own financial affairs, they can petition a probate court for guardianship. If a judge agrees, that parent loses the legal right to manage their own money, property, and medical decisions. The guardian takes over. It doesn't require proof of dementia. It requires a doctor's evaluation and a court filing. And if the parent doesn't have strong legal protections already in place, it can move faster than most people realize. Patricia and I talked for 2 hours. She pulled up my accounts, my documents, my current structure. She laid it all out. You're not unprotected, she said, but you're not as protected as you should be. I said, what do I need to do? She said, first, we call an estate attorney. I called one the next morning. Her name was Constance Webb, and she'd been practicing estate law in Ohio for 30 years. We met in her office on a Thursday. I brought everything: brokerage statements, property records, the deed to the Kentucky land, Gary's trust documents, my existing will. Constance reviewed everything, asked me a dozen careful questions, and then said, very plainly, what you're describing, the progression of comments, the suggestion of a capacity evaluation, the involvement of a financial advisor you didn't request, that's a pattern I recognize. You did the right thing coming in now. She recommended a revocable living trust. Move the house, the brokerage accounts, the Kentucky land into the trust. Name myself as the trustee while I'm alive and capable. Name Constance's firm as successor trustee, with instructions that if I become incapacitated, control passes to them. Not to my children, until I designate otherwise in writing with 2 physicians' confirmation. We also updated my durable power of attorney, my healthcare proxy, and my will. Then she recommended I get a voluntary cognitive evaluation from my own doctor, completely voluntarily, completely on my terms, and get the results in writing. Not because anything was wrong. Because if someone tried to question my capacity, I'd already have documentation that refuted the claim. I made the appointment that afternoon. The evaluation took 3 hours. Memory tests, spatial reasoning, processing speed, verbal recall. My doctor, who has known me for 16 years, sat across from me afterward and said, Lynn, you're in the top percentile for your age group. I'll put that in writing. She did. I walked out of that office with a certified copy of the results in my hand, and I thought, you wanted documentation? I've got your documentation. Constance finalized the trust on March 14th. I signed everything in her office with 2 witnesses and a notary present. The house transferred into the trust 3 days later. The brokerage accounts followed the week after. The Kentucky parcel was retitled by the end of the month. By the time Audrey slid that brochure across the table in April, every single asset I owned was already protected inside a legal structure that she and Spencer could not touch without a court battle they would lose. I just hadn't told her yet. The brunch was her idea. She said she wanted to reconnect. She chose the restaurant, a nice place near her house, the kind with cloth napkins and servers who refill your water before you have to ask. She came alone. I noticed that. Spencer wasn't there. Owen wasn't there. She'd come by herself, and I thought, she thinks this will be easier one-on-one. She thinks she can manage me better without an audience. The food came. We talked about the kids, about a show she'd been watching, about a trip she and Spencer were thinking about taking to Portugal. I listened. I ate my eggs. I let the conversation breathe. Then she opened her bag and took out the brochure. Meadow Ridge Senior Living. She'd done her homework, I'll give her that. It was a nice facility, as far as brochures go, private rooms, an activities program, a certified memory care unit. The monthly rate, listed in tasteful small print near the back, was $5,800. I know this is a lot to process, Audrey said. But Mom, we've all been worried. You're alone in that house. It's a lot to maintain. And after what happened with Dad, Spencer and I think it would be better for you to be somewhere where there's support, where people are checking on you. Checking on me, I repeated. In a good way. She reached across the table and touched my hand. You've worked so hard your whole life. You deserve to rest, to let someone else handle things. I looked at my daughter. I have loved her since the moment she was born. I have loved her through her difficult teenage years and her first heartbreak and the wedding, where she forgot to send me the correct parking information, and I circled the venue for 45 minutes in the rain. I have loved her completely and imperfectly, the way mothers do. And I looked at her face in that moment, at the careful arrangement of concern on it, and I felt something settle very quietly inside me. Audrey, I said, can I ask you something? Of course. Is Spencer having money trouble? Her hand went still on mine. What? No. Why would you? That's not what this is about. I'm not angry, I said. I'm just asking. She pulled her hand back. This is about you, Mom. This is about making sure you're safe. $5,800 a month, I said. Meadow Ridge. That's what it says in the back. There are ways to structure it. With the house and the accounts. My house, I said. My accounts. She looked at me. Mom, I want to show you something. I reached into my bag, my own bag, the brown leather one I've had for 12 years, and I took out an envelope. I set it on the table next to the Meadow Ridge brochure. Go ahead and open it. She hesitated. Then she picked it up and slid out the document inside. It was the summary page from Constance's office, the trust registration, the asset transfer confirmation, my name as trustee, Constance's firm as successor. Every property, every account listed and retitled. Dated March 14th. Audrey read it. She read it again. The color changed in her face. Not all at once, but in pieces, like a tide going out. What is this? It's a revocable living trust, I said. Everything I own is inside it. My house, my accounts, the Kentucky land. And in the event that my capacity is ever called into question. I reached back into the bag and took out the second envelope. Here is a certified cognitive evaluation from my doctor, conducted 6 weeks ago, finding me completely competent and in the 94th percentile for my age group. Audrey set the documents down on the table. Mom, I'm not finished. My voice was even. I want you to know that. I wasn't raised to make scenes in restaurants. I know about the conversation you had with Owen in February. I know about Spencer's contact at the financial advisory firm. I know the word you used was capacity. I paused. I want you to understand that I understand what that word means. And I want you to understand that I was not going to sit quietly while my children, tried to take my life out of my own hands. She started to cry. Not soft crying, real crying, the kind that surprises even the person doing it. Mom, we were scared. We just didn't want. If something happened to you, then you should have called me. You should have asked me. You should have come to me and said, Mom, I'm scared. Mom, I don't know what happens if you get sick. That's what you should have done. I took a breath. Instead, you made plans. You made appointments. You brought a brochure to brunch. She wiped her eyes with her napkin. Spencer is. We've had some financial pressure, he thought. He said if the house sold and the accounts were consolidated. I know, I said. She looked up. I know, I said again, and that's what makes this so hard. Because I do still love you. I love you and your children, and I am not going to pretend this didn't happen, but I am also not going to exile you from my life. What I am going to do is be very clear about what happens next. She was quiet. The trust is not changing. Patricia and Constance will remain in their roles. No financial advisor Spencer recommends will ever have access to my accounts. And if I ever hear the word capacity used again in relation to me, by you or by Owen or by anyone associated with either of you, I will have Constance file a formal response with documentation that will make any future guardianship claim very, very difficult to pursue. I folded my hands on the table. Do you understand? She nodded slowly. Spencer needs to find another solution to his financial problems, I said. That's not my responsibility. But I would encourage him to do it quickly, before whatever pressure he's under gets worse. She didn't ask how I knew. I didn't explain. Some things you learn in 30 years of accounts receivable, the shape of a cash flow problem, the particular desperation underneath a well-dressed plan. I picked up the Meadow Ridge brochure. I folded it once and set it in the small pile of papers beside my plate. "The garden at my house," I said, "is in bloom right now. I planted tulips last October, 6 different varieties. If you'd like to come see them, I'd like that very much. Just call first." I finished my coffee. I paid the check, mine and hers both, because I could and because I wanted to, and I hugged my daughter on the sidewalk outside while she was still crying. Then I drove home. Owen called me that evening. I think Audrey had called him first, because when I picked up, he sounded like someone who had just been told to be careful. "Mom," he said. "Can we talk?" "We can always talk," I said. "That's never been the problem, Owen." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I should have called you directly. In February. I should have said what I was worried about. Not just, I shouldn't have let Audrey talk me into that script. That script, I let that sit there between us." "I know I messed up," he said. "You did," I said. "But I also know you love your sister. And I know being put in the middle is a hard place to stand." I sat down in my kitchen chair, the one by the window that looks out at the backyard. The tulips were just starting to come up along the fence. "What I need from you, going forward, is simple. If you're worried about me, you call me. You don't go around me. You don't carry messages for Spencer. You call me and you say, 'Mom, I'm worried.' That's it," he said. "Okay, and I need you to know," I said, "that I am completely fine. I have never been confused about my money, my property, or my own life. I was not ripe for the taking. And if either of you had simply asked me, just asked, openly, honestly, I would have sat down with both of you and shown you exactly where everything stands and what happens to it when I'm gone. Which, for the record, is a conversation I am perfectly willing to have. Just not at a restaurant with a brochure." He laughed a little. It was shaky, but it was real. "Can I come over this weekend?" "Sunday," I said. "I'll make the chili you like." He said he'd be there. It's been 4 months since the brunch. Spencer and Audrey did eventually sit down with a debt counselor. I didn't ask. Audrey told me herself one afternoon when she came to see the tulips. Spencer had taken a second mortgage on their house without telling her the full picture. He'd had losses in a business venture he'd kept quiet about. He'd thought, "I'm reconstructing this from what Audrey told me, so I'm only guessing at the edges. That if my assets were liquidated and he could access even a portion through Audrey's inheritance, it would solve the immediate problem." It was not a good plan. But I understand how desperation makes bad plans look like good ones. They're working through it now. Slowly. With professional help and a lot of hard conversations I'm not party to. That's as it should be. Their marriage, their finances, their work to do. Audrey and I have breakfast every other Saturday. We don't talk about Spencer's situation. We don't talk about Meadow Ridge. We talk about her kids, about my garden, about a book club I joined in March with 6 other women from my neighborhood who are all, as it turns out, more interesting than I expected. Owen comes for Sunday chili about once a month. We watch whatever game is on. Sometimes we don't talk much. That's fine too. My house is still mine. My accounts are still mine. My tulips, all 6 varieties, red and orange and white, and a pale lavender one that took me 3 years to find the right bulb for, came up exactly the way I planned. Patricia and I met last week to review the 3rd quarter statements. Everything is where it should be. The trust is functioning exactly as designed. Constance's office checks in every 6 months just to make sure nothing needs updating. I sleep well at night. I always have. But I sleep a little better now, knowing that every single thing I built with Gary, every dollar, every deed, every decision, is documented, protected, and entirely, legally, unquestionably mine. My daughter brought a brochure to brunch. I brought a trust, a cognitive evaluation, and 31 years of knowing exactly what I own. She cried. I paid the check. The tulips are beautiful this year.